Today we're talking about the essay, How It Feels to Be Colored Me by Zora Neale Hurston, the one and only.
So I ask, how did you feel reading this essay?
Okay, so it's been a while since we've read our girl Zora. For those of you who didn't know, she's one of my favorite writers. I don't know why. It's been a while since we've pulled up some of her stories. It's very different reading her essay, but I'll say this. So between the two of us, audience out there, if you didn't know, I've read the Valerie Boyd, I think it was, autobiography on her, or biography on her. But I wouldn't say I learned a lot about Zora's views. A lot of this did come out when you read those sorts of things, but there's something magical, not only just about Zora's writing and the way she just puts a fact, but also there's a unique time space in which this is written. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely feels unique, but I did kind of feel a new Zora a little bit. I feel like she was speaking to both sides of an argument almost. And I found it kind of refreshing that she was like, hey, this is kind of how I grew up. This is what I experienced. And this is why I believe this way that I do. And if you don't, that's okay, because your experiences are unique to you. And I thought, wow, that's kind of impactful.
If we look at the narrative of, American narrative particularly, right? Like during slavery, there was not a lot, if any. I mean, the slave narratives, the hymns, it was very limited, the access into what is the Black experience from their perspective, right?
Right.
You had Frederick Douglass, right, particularly towards the end of slavery and such, who, along with other prolific writers, right? But then you kind of moved into the post-slavery, which, Booker T. Washington and W.B. Du Bois is kind of who I think of here. Well, Washington, I think, lived 8 or 9 years as a slave technically, but you live into just post-slavery, right? Where you went from this worldview of being owned in property, or at least told that and treated lesser than, to still being treated lesser than, but being told you have rights, but not really getting access to them, right? And then the Harlem Renaissance is this era where Zora's writing, right? And you've got prolific writers like Langston Hughes, who, they had their own little tiffs and such. But you could see the narrative kind of shift through time of what's important to me and what's important to us, the African Americans that are writing these narratives, right? And to me, the thing that I find most compelling or interesting about Zora, who is a very unique soul, is she was never afraid to embrace what, a lot of critics will call Black happiness or Black joy, right? You have lots of writing about Black pain, Black anguish, the microaggressions that they'd experience. But Zora, there's just something unique about the way that she can be happy in her individuality, which includes the Black identity.
So there's two things there. The first one, I think, is the crux of the whole story, right? You said the word told. She was not told that her Blackness mattered until she went to a white town, till she went to Jacksonville. And then it became a thing. And I remember, and I might have mentioned this before, when I was a child, 7 years old, I think, we moved to California, and I remember hearing Spanish for the first time. I think that's when I heard it. And it was kind of revolutionary as a kid, because all I'd heard was English my whole life. And then I remember hearing Spanish being spoke on the phone, and it was like, my mind. I'm like, wait a minute, the phone can translate other things besides English? And I that's kind of crazy to think of, if all you know is one thing and then you're introduced or presented with something else, it is kind of jarring. And especially as a child, I think, because everything is new and everything is fresh.
I think I get what you're saying.
And the other thing, and the other thing that I think that is unique about this story is Zora's almost arguing that because she didn't know any better, at least that's how I interpreted it, was that once it was presented that this mattered, then maybe her perspective changed. However, she didn't seem to like blame slavery. I mean, she even kind of calls out and says that happened 60 years ago. It didn't happen to me. But then she realizes the ramifications of slavery once race becomes something that matters in her life because somebody else told her it did.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It kind of reminds me of, remember actually the Du Bois story, The Comet, where I think it was The Comet. That was the one where you had, I think it was a African-American man and a white woman, and they thought they were like kind of like the last people in the world, if I recall correctly. I might be mixing up my stories here, but race no longer mattered to them when they were the last two in the world. Why? Because there wasn't anyone around them to tell them that it mattered, right? It's not that it matters that Zora is black, in my opinion, right? It mattered. Well, I mean,
it does, but it doesn't, right? That's really tough. That's the thing here.
If I can, it's like you it's okay to embrace differences, right? Like, I don't want to say that it doesn't matter to be black, because there are physical specificities in terms of even hair and stuff like that can matter, right? But at the same time, being black, it's in America, it was viewed as less than, and you're treated worse and denied privileges, right?
Yes,
to an extent, right? And
a big
that's
extent.
What matters the most, right? Like, we could deprive you of those things as a society. Again, there's a society being around because of these attributes, right? It wasn't the attributes that meant anything. And that's what, I think, to the point of this essay, like that, the whole bag analogy, right? I maybe the great creator just filled these bags up with various different things, and you could pick all the stuff up inside the bag and put it in an effort bag. Does it make it any different? Isn't what's inside the bag that matters? Why does it matter if it's a brown bag or a white bag, right? There's something beautiful about that analogy, I think, that can really kind of stir up some emotions of realizing that the outer layer is like almost one of the least important things on some levels.
I love the bag stuff, and that, again, was almost very poetic and kind of went over my head a little bit. As the historian, I looked at this and I thought about it of, there seem to be two major factors that came to play as a role here of, first of all, is geography, right? Of she lived in a place and then moved to a different place. And then we know, from our history that there's the North and the South. Like, geography played a big role in, people of color in their lives. And then the other thing that was interesting was kind of almost like this socioeconomic kind of background of the whole story, because Zora was, and again, I don't know her whole biography, but she was specifically sent as a young girl to Jacksonville to go to school. And so you have that kind of socioeconomic play in here as well that divides people on top of the geographical division of people.
Well, have you ever, like, you as a person ever traveled somewhere where you stuck out for some reason, whether you were the minority in that area, or whether you just looked different than everyone in the area? Like, has that ever happened to you?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And the thing is maybe it's just, I don't know if it's nature versus nurture. I don't know if it's just because I don't know, I hate to say egotistical, but I didn't feel less than. I didn't feel like people were looking down upon me because I didn't dress like them, look like them, talk like them. I just felt different, but it didn't make me feel less than.
Yeah. I would share that. So my wife and I, we've traveled a lot, and we do love traveling all over the world, including like Latin America. Like, we spent a couple of weeks in various Latin American countries. And it's kind of interesting because, they don't have a lot of blonde haired individual. My wife's blonde. So it was always the blonde or something like that, how they refer to her. And sometimes we referred to as, hey, the white people, believe it or not. Right.
Oh, Lord.
It is what
That's
it is.
funny.
Well, it's like you said, the first time, like the first time you said it, it was fine. Right. Like, yeah.
But is it offensive? Does it feel offensive?
Not the first time. Not the first time. Right. The second time, even then it wasn't. It was like, yeah, well, yeah, we are. But then, like, it kind of made me think to the point of the story, like, how many times does that happen? because we were the only white people in the room, right? And let's say you have a classroom of 15 kids and you're trying to describe the one black kid. When do you say the kid with black skin, right? Like a differentiating factor that's easily visible by everyone who can see, right? At what point though, when it's like people default to that, like, oh, you're the white guy, that you're like, well, I'm more than that. Like, we're more than just being.
That's tough. That's tough though, right? I mean, if there's always those jokes. I see these things online on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and it's like the token white guy, or the token black guy, or the token Hispanic guy, or woman, or whatever. And it's funny because it's true, or is it disrespectful because it's true? I don't know, because in essence it is true. And I guess if it's defined as only that thing, and the self-awareness of it, so to speak, is it's only that, then I think you have a problem. But I think if it is not the only, but if it's a defining factor, I don't think that's such a negative thing. And for me, that's kind of one of the major importances of this essay. Was Zora was saying, hey, this is a important thing, but this isn't the only important thing about me, is that I'm a person of color.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of like that part of the essay. The cosmic Zora is what I describe it as. She says, at certain times, I have no race. I am me. And I like that because when we think about Zora's writing and we talk about her embracing all the emotions of the spectrum of being a human, there's no way you and I can relate on any form of what it means to be black per se. Like, we cannot speak to that experience.
Never. Right? Absolutely not.
But what the story brings out is, in my opinion, I think if you walk away from this and you're like, oh, just be happy with the happy moments, like don't focus on the bad, like I think you kind of miss the point of the story, because there's a level of empathy here with understanding it, but then also realizing that the constant microaggressions, or the constant things that pop up, being on your guard almost a lot, like to that point about being the white guys. You don't experience that in America, because most people, predominantly are white in America, depending on the neighborhood that you're in too, that you have a certain amount of expectations that you can feel safe in, and to be constantly on your guard, to be almost being targeted sometimes, depending on people's, prejudices towards you, it's emotionally exhausting, right? So I guess the question is, what is that universal human experience? What is that cosmic Zora? What is it that allows us to that we can all relate to? And I think that's what's so great about Zora's writing is that joy, right? Like, there is a certain amount of joy that hopefully most people can experience at some point in their life, whether it be that the job promotion, whether it be Christmas Day. Like, that for me, there's a lot of moments I've been blessed with to have a lot of happy, joyous moments. And it's like, is that the universal experience that all humans deserve to have, as opposed to being just defined by, specific characteristics that are unique, but it's not universal?
100% agree. Yeah, we all deserve it. And I think it comes back to the thing that you said at the beginning, is society. Is that society enforces these differences between us, and Zora is experiencing that for the first time, and it's giving her almost like a new identity, right? If that she's the quote little colored girl, and before she was just a little girl. And this changes your whole perspective. And I remember that happening as a kid of, and not to her extent. Again, I don't have any of those experiences, obviously, but I was, a little kid, and then I was a little boy, and then I was the short little boy, and, I was the nerdy short little boy, and I kept having all these things added on to my perspective of myself by society as how they were describing me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and then there's that reaction to that too, right? To the point of, I don't think it's necessarily the point, but you have the who's the jester in the room, right? Like, who's playing the role of entertainment, and the way that she would kind of laugh and joke with them.
Ooh,
it was never
yeah.
demeaning to her, but it can be to others.
But
in
it
certain
was.
to some circumstances and to some people in certain times it can be, right? So
if you're not self-aware of it, is it true though? Right?
Well, I think that's kind of my point that I'm trying to drive to, but I'm not really sure my exact words. But like, remember the what is it? The double consciousness theory, kind of like with W.B. Du Bois, where you have like the self that you're aware of, but then you also have the self as society sees you consciousness, right? So you almost are living two lives at times, and society is what's creating that second you, right? And you don't always have a positive view of yourself when you're taking in all this feedback, and particularly if people keep giving you negative feedback, that can weigh you down.
To bring it back again to the kind of end of the story of the bags, right, is you probably see yourself as a certain color bag that has certain things inside of it. Society sees you as a different color that has certain things inside of it, but does it really matter? Or is there some combination of those bags that is the true you? And I think Zora does a great job of showing us of that if you dump everything out and you mix it all up, you're still going to have very similar results. And I think that is a positive message of that inside matters more than what the color of the bag is.
And I think to wrap it up, there's the quote from her where she says, "Sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it does not make me angry. It merely astonishes me. How can any deny themselves the pleasure of my company? It's beyond me." Right? She sees the diamond in herself, and that's just what I love about Zora. So I don't know. This has just been our reaction. This is our talk on how it feels to be colored me. What did you guys think of the story? What was your takeaway? Let us know in the comments down below what your thoughts are on this story. We'll leave a playlist of all the Zora talks that we have down below because we love her. Hopefully you love her writing, or this, if this is your first writing, oh man, it just keeps getting better. Every story you read from her. I really hope you continue to read her if this is your first. But my name has been Una. Thank you for spending time with us. Peace.
Peace.